Minister, NPHET is meeting today to consider what happens with mandatory mask wearing. For many people, this will be a very welcome sign that we are leaving the pandemic behind us. But many unions mandating the NBRU, representing workers in transport and retail in particular, have had concerns. And Patricia King of Congress has called for the rules to be kept for a short period. So, as you know, there will be a lot of anxiety for staff and people who are vulnerable, and this will impact especially on those considering using trains, buses and other forms of public transport. Encouraging people back onto public transport is essential, as you know, to meet our climate targets. Emissions were up 11% at the end of September versus 2020. For people concerned about mask rules being changed on public transport, I want to ask you this morning, what advice do you have as Minister for them? As part of the budget, 25 million was announced to cut fares in half for young people between 19 and 23. The Labour Party called for them to be free, but in fairness, you met us halfway. Minister, this will make a real difference for young people struggling with the cost of living and encourage lifelong use of public transport. But my question is, when will it be a reality? Was no work done in advance of the budget to get this in place, or was it thrown in at the last minute? All we're being told is that it will be mid-2022. So when exactly will it be put in place? Do you have a deadline that you have put to have this delivered? My colleague, Jed Nash, uncovered this week that there are no plans yet to provide this youth fare reduction on commercial bus operators. So your budget statement said quite clearly that this will apply across the transport network. So many young people, especially in rural areas, won't have access to cheaper fares because they won't be available. So no timeline could be provided by you to Jed Nash as regards when this will be in place. And with more people working remotely or part-time in the office after COVID, there is also still no flexi-tax saver ticket in place to reflect the changed work practices. So when will that be delivered? So lots of talk about tackling the cost of living, but a concrete measure that would encourage more people to use public transport and reduce costs is delayed. Ministers, you have a lot of announcements. I've outlined many of them there. We were getting very little in relation to definitive dates as regards when these measures in relation to public transport will actually be implemented. Again, as part of the cost of living package last week, a 20% reduction in fares was announced. But again, that won't now come into force, we hear, until May. If the government is really serious about encouraging more people to use public transport, well then these proposals would be a priority. So, Minister, what is the position on from the government and from you on the use of mask wearing on public transport and retail settings for workers who have concerns? When will the half-price youth travel card be ready? Will you ensure that commercial transport operators are covered? Deputy. And when will the flexi tax saver ticket be introduced? And when will the 20% reduction you announced recently also be introduced?
Thank you very much indeed. As you say, NPHET are meeting today, and they will issue a letter later on today to Minister Stephen Donnelly, and I look forward to hearing their advice. My view, which I'm happy to share publicly, is that we should start immediately by removing the requirement for our school children to have to wear masks in school. I think it was put in for good reasons, for good public health reasons, but I think there are also good reasons for the health of our children in a wider context of them not having to wear masks, and I hope that can be done straight away. And I have the same view with regard to retail and public transport. I believe that we should go from a mandatory system towards a guidance system, public health guidance, that continue to wear masks. It does make real sense. It makes good public health sense. And I would advise anyone to continue for the media, because we still have COVID, it's quite a scale. But I think the time for that mandatory conditions, it's part of the unwinding. And I will listen and heed, and we will take NPHET's views, obviously, and position into account. But my own view is we should further the loosening of restrictions that have been in place. And I listen to respect to both the teachers' unions and the public transport bus workers' unions. But my own view is, while people will still continue to wear masks, vast majority of people I would expect for the immediate period, I don't believe we should continue it as a mandatory system, is my view. But we want people back on public transport. The numbers are back about 60% to pre-COVID levels, varied across the country. The long-distance commuting numbers are not back. It'd be no surprise for people to hear that. Some of the regional cities numbers are back. Some of the new services in Louth, Navan and other services are up almost way beyond what the expectations were. The cost of living measure that we introduced last week wasn't just on cutting public transport fares 20%, wasn't just for cost of living reasons, as urgent as they were. It was also to try and give public transport a boost at this time, so we don't see just the road space all taken up by people going back to cars. We want to encourage people back on public transport. It is safe. We want the numbers back up. I had a meeting last week with the CEOs of Dublin Bus, Bus Éireann, Irish Rail and the NTA to impress on them the need for us to be quick on this. That the end of April is what I was setting them as the timeline. I was hoping we could see both the reintroduction of the youth new 50% reduction in youth travel fares and also the 20% reduction in the PSO public transport measures. It takes them, they say, and they're the experts in the area, 6, 8, 10 weeks typically to change all the ticketing machines, change all the tariffs. I've said to them we have to do it, or I want them to do it by the end of April, and they've assured me that they'll do everything to deliver it in that time frame. It's more difficult with the commercial operators because we don't set fares, we don't monitor fares, we don't regulate fares in the same way. And both for the PSO and for the youth travel card, that presents a significant difficulty in how we implement it. I'll come back to you.
Minister, I asked you a number of questions. You outlined what your view is pre-taking NPHET advice in relation to mask wearing. I'm just saying out straight, many workers have deep concern there, and particularly in transport and retail. I know there are problems in introducing new technology in public transport system. I had to come in and clean up a mess of 8.5 years from your government and the previous Fianna Fáil government in relation to the Leap card and finally introduce it. There's always a lead time in relation to changes in technology. I understand that. However, you've given us various different dates and commitments in relation to the 4 schemes that I outlined. In relation to commercial services, I'm one of these people who opposes this urban-rural divide. You have to deliver for commercial services and for providers who are operating in rural areas as much as urban areas. If you want people, as you keep talking, to use public transport in rural areas, you're going to have to deliver for them on time lines as well. And finally, in relation to the Flexi Travel Tax Saver ticket, you never give us a commitment in relation to when that will be delivered, because everybody needs to be able to use that as well, given their changing working conditions and times.
I ran out of time before I was able to answer that question. And I agree with you. The transformation to public transport has to be for the whole country. And we could introduce a new flexi ticket within the urban Dublin area, for example, very quickly, because we have the likes of the Leap cards and the likes of the Lewis, you have the swipe on, swipe off. Difficulty with longer distance commuting services is you don't have that. And I have to listen to the reality that the officials meet, that they have a difficulty in adapting when they don't have that swipe on, swipe off and in the rural train stations or bus stations. Similarly, I believe in absolutely rural public transport is going to be key. And I believe the Connecting Ireland new rural public transport system is also going to be key. But I have to be honest with you, and we have to face the reality we are with. We don't regulate those non-PSO services. We don't monitor, manage and have control as to how they manage cash or other ticket systems. And that presents real difficulties which we're looking to resolve, but which is not, it will not be done in the same time frame or as quickly or as easily as we can on the PSO services where we do have that sort of systems in place.
Moving on to the